You're listening to the CD Baby DIY Music Podcast. Hey there, and welcome to the CD Baby DIY Music Podcast. My name is Kevin, and for this episode, we have the first of what we hope will be many interviews with an artist where we focus in on one specific thing that they did in order to expand their fan base and see some success with their music. So for this episode, we're talking to Jonathan Coultan. Some of you may have already heard of him. He's an artist who decided one day that he would write or record a new song every week, have it available on his website for his fans to listen to, and just challenged himself to do that every week for a year. What happened was several things. He discovered it was much more difficult than he thought it would be, and it became a huge challenge for him. But at the same time, it also drew a lot of people into his music, and all sorts of people were playing his Thing a Week song from podcasts to other blogs, and he just really saw an increase in his fan base. So we figured hearing his story of how that all happened and how he put it together would be very interesting. But before we jump to that interview, I just wanted to give you a taste of the kind of music he writes. He usually writes from a humor slant. He's known for his comical type songs. And this song I'm going to play for you is one that he called one of his bigger hits off the website, and it's one that I found very entertaining as well. It's called Tom Cruise Crazy. So here's Tom Cruise Crazy, and after that, we'll jump right into the interview with Jonathan.
Tom Cruise is so in love with Katie. At least all his people tell him so. And while he thinks that she's a very special lady, it's probably not the way he'd choose to go. But a lifetime of longing looks would cause too much distraction. Good thing that he's not gay anymore. Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise crazy. Just be glad it's him, not you. If you had Tom Cruise's troubles, you might be Tom Cruise crazy too. You'd flash your big white shiny smile, you'd buy expensive shoes, but you'd be the only man on earth who couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise. Oh no, you couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is always getting older. He knows he'll never be that young again. And when Tom Cruise looks back over his shoulder, he sees 1,000 younger leading men. And he knows someday he'll have to play an old retarded grandpa, while someone younger plays his sexy son. Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise crazy. Just be glad it's him, not you. If you had Tom Cruise's troubles, you might be Tom Cruise crazy too. You'd flash your big white shiny smile, you'd buy expensive shoes, but you'd be the only man on earth who couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise. Oh no, you couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise. Somewhere there's a place for him, 'cause he's not of this world anymore. Somewhere in some secluded castle, poor Tom Cruise sits staring at the wall. And the outside world is always such a hassle. Sometimes he won't go out at all. There are millions who know his name. Everybody loves him. Why is it that he feels so alone? is Tom Cruise crazy? Just be glad it's him, not you. If you had Tom Cruise's troubles, you might be Tom Cruise crazy too. You'd flash your big white shiny smile, you'd buy expensive shoes, but you'd be the only man on earth who couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise. Oh no, you couldn't enjoy Tom Cruise.
All right, I have on the phone with us Jonathan Coultan. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I read that you were a computer programmer before and just decided one day that you were going to just become a professional musician full-time. Tell us about that transition in your life.
Yeah, well, it wasn't actually one day it occurred to me. You know, it was the kind of thing that I had always intended to do. You know, I never meant to end up writing software for a living, but I sort of accidentally did that for 8 or 9 years. Mm-hmm. And I'd been doing music, you know, sort of on the side and as a hobby, and I already had one or I guess one CD and one EP that I was selling on CD Baby, you know, one copy a month to my friends or whatever. Yeah, it was really just one of those things that I finally got to the point where I decided to do it, and that was September of 2005.
So the thing a week idea, was that something that you kind of had in the back of your mind already, or was it, you know, you
No, I mean, I think it was the thing that you know, so I left this day job and I had a new daughter as of about 6 months prior to that. Mm-hmm. and you know, so it was pretty much me and the nanny and the baby rattling around in this apartment here in Brooklyn. So I was like, well, I better do some actual work, you know. I can't just sit around and wait for the money to roll in. Yeah. So, Thing a Week was, I guess, a couple of things. It was partially to keep myself busy and challenge myself creatively, and it was also, you know, I will admit it was a bit of a stunt, a bit of an attention getter. I thought that if I were able to do it long enough and well enough, it might make some people pay attention.
So when you started that, did you already have a built-in fan base when you were launching that on your blog, or was it something where you're just starting completely from scratch?
No, it was not completely from scratch. I had some small number of fans. You know, not a lot of traffic to speak of, just because there wasn't very much going on my website. I had started a blog sometime prior to that, and it was just me talking about myself mostly, you know. Mm-hmm. I guess that's what most blogs are. But and I had done some work with my friend John Hodgman, who was at that point a mere author, but now is a general famous person. He's the PC on the Mac ads, and
oh yeah, that's right,
correspondent on the Daily Show, and we went to college together, and he had started this reading series in Brooklyn called the Little Gray Book Lectures, which was like a live show that he would do, where he would invite authors to come speak. And I had written some songs for that show, and I would play music for that show. And you know, so I think some people knew me from that, and some people knew me from some of the songs that I had already put out on the CD. But it was definitely very small when I first started Thing a Week.
So when you started the Thing a Week, you had your blog, and you were recording all the songs yourself and writing them within a week. How was that process?
Yeah, it was not. They were not all songs that I wrote that week. There were a few that were covers. There were a couple that were songs that I had already written but just never recorded. So the way I like to describe it is I recorded a new song every week, although that sounds a lot less impressive than that. But there were a lot of new ones in there. There were mostly new ones. And it was very hard, you know. It was the kind of thing where I think a lot of creative people have this store of ideas that they go to and cycle through, you know, every time they sit down to write something. And so it's like you have 4 or 5 things that are spinning around in your head, and you're like, oh, I should really finish that one of these days, you know. So I had those, and I tore through those immediately, and then I got to this really interesting place where there was literally nothing in my head to rely on, you know. And so I really did start having to come up with stuff that week. And that's when it got really hard. And also, that's when it got really interesting, too.
Well, I know I actually came across your music probably about a year ago. There's a podcast that I listened to called the Delta Park Project, and they would play your song every week. And I know that I think the first time where I really noticed what you were doing was when they played the Tom Cruise song.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there just cracking up in my car. It really seemed like at that point where you just, was that the point where you were out of ideas and just grabbing things from current events and?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think that song was actually originally as I was the German that was pretty much came to me completely in that week, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So like from idea to from the very first part of the idea to the very finish of the song, that all happened in a week. And I think when I first started writing it, it was an anti-George Bush song. But then I thought that was too easy of a target, so I switched it up. Also, I didn't want to get all political.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have certain goals for your writing each week, or just recording, even if it was an older idea you're reworking? How did you go about the process of actually getting it done within a week? It seems like artists, myself being an artist, know that time management is not our greatest strength.
Yeah. Well, you know, the interesting thing is, that most of them, when I put them on the website, I felt like they were not done. You know, and I think that's the kicker, is that you can actually, when you sit down to do something, you can actually complete 90 to 95% of it pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
It's that last 5% that takes the longest amount of time. You know, when you're sitting there and you're tweaking the mix, you're like, I really don't like that guitar part. You know, I need a new guitar part. And the thing that this taught me was really the value in saying, this is done. You know, it's not perfect, but it's done. Mm-hmm. And it simply because it was Friday. It was the self-imposed deadline, but you know, after a certain point, there were enough people watching that it would have been embarrassing to start really slipping.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, really, sometimes I would wake up in the morning on Friday and I would have been trying all week to come up with something, and I would still have nothing, you know, and I'd be really depressed and really down, but I would just turn on the stuff and just start going. And, you know, even if it was awful, even if it started out awful, it would often end up okay, at least okay. And even some of the ones that I still hate, there are people who those are their favorites, you know.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you, it's like I think everyone is a pretty bad judge of their own stuff.
Mm-hmm. What kind of setup were you using to record? I assume you're just recording at your apartment or your house, or?
Yeah, I have a Digio 2 and Pro Tools LE, and I use a Mac. Right now I'm on a Intel Mac Mini, but for most of the week I was on a G4 dual 867. Now this is good, really interesting stuff. I know people are going to be really thrilled to hear.
Actually, they love that kind of
dual
stuff.
Dual 867.
We'll probably get our most comments about that.
But yeah, and it's all, you know, I have a couple of microphones and a couple of boxes, sound modules, and
were you programming all the drums? That was the one thing I was
the drums
about.
Yeah, everybody asked about the drums. Some of the drums are programmed, but not many. The bulk of the drums are from a collection called Reel Drums, REEL drums, and they're just great. You get these Pro Tools sessions, and it's a session drummer in a studio playing to a click track, but they're so nicely tempo mapped that you can really cut and paste them very easily, and it sounds like real drums because it is real drums, essentially, you know.
Yeah.
And you get there's all different mics. There's overhead mics and direct mics, and so you really have a lot of control over that stuff. So whenever it sounds like a live drummer doing all sorts of different things, that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
Or other collections that I have, or sometimes I would grab loops from GarageBand or Soundtrack or whatever I had on hand.
So after you started getting this rolling, how did you start getting people excited about it and spreading the word about it?
Well, I don't think that I did anything really actively to promote it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than just, it is in and itself sort of a promotional thing. And I really think I just got lucky. Early on I had, I think it was song 5 was Baby Got Back, which is my cover of the Sir Mix-a-Lot song. And that just went crazy. It was this sort of viral hit.
I listened to it last night. It's very entertaining.
Oh, thank you. It felt like kind of a cheap joke to me when I did it, and I certainly didn't think it was an original idea. But for whatever reason, a lot of people liked it, and it got passed around and linked like crazy, and that was really the beginning of the large traffic. And then from there, it was just steady growth. And I really credit podcasters who were playing the music and bloggers who were writing about it, and
I noticed that you have on your website a huge list of podcasts that have played your music or played on a regular basis. Was that something you were submitting to them, or just people found out about?
No, it was really just a word of mouth thing. I mean, that's the great thing about podcasts. Everybody who podcasts also listens to podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this really well connected network, and I feel like if there's an idea that gets into that network, it bounces around pretty efficiently. And I really think that's what happened. And also I think podcasters are a lot of them are, because it is a DIY kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are very supportive of DIY music, especially for legal reasons. I made sure to make it clear that I wanted my music to be played on podcasts and that I wasn't going to sue anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it in a couple of the PodSafe music databases, and I'm sure some people found it through that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've read that you've said that music fans don't just want to buy music anymore; they want to have ongoing experience with the artist. How do you develop that experience or interaction with the artist for your fans?
For me, that's an idea that I didn't start with. That idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something that has sort of become clear to me out of what has happened over these last couple of years. And really, when I started doing this, because I was blogging has this really strange voice when you're writing for a blog, because you're writing for an audience that you don't know, but you sort of like write as if you're talking to your friend or something. I don't know. It's this very personal thing. It's like a diary.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking a lot about what I was doing and why I was doing it, and the idea that I was hoping to make a living this way, and I wasn't sure it was going to work, and if I would hear about new things that independent musicians could use to do this sort of thing, I'd write about that and what I thought about it, and I really think for me it was just it was almost like therapy for me. It's just like a way to force myself to talk about these things and think about these things. But I think what ends up happening is that people read that and they get involved in my story, and so they're sort of interested to see whether or not I can succeed, and in some ways they become vested in that.
Uh-huh.
So when they buy my music, they feel like they're supporting me and they're becoming a part of this story, and they're helping to change what happens in the story. And I think that's a really, really great thing.
What are some specific things that you've done or continue to do in order to maintain that relationship? I've read that you blog a lot. Is that mainly how you just keep that relationship going?
Yeah, it is. And, I still continue to do that stuff. I've also, I did a couple of things along the way that I wish I had done more of looking back. But, I did this thing where I recorded a song that I didn't have time to record a guitar solo for in the solo section, so I had a contest where people could submit solos of any kind, and we all voted and picked one, and that's actually the one that ended up on the record.
Bet you got some crazy stuff.
Yeah, there was some crazy stuff. Yeah, there was somebody had a little cello solo, which did not make it, but we ended up with plain old guitar, which what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And then I also think that I encourage people to create other things based on the music, and I make it easy for them to come to the site and submit those things so that they get linked to the song that they're based on. So like music videos and artwork and even covers and to some extent remixes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just the stuff we're talking about and thinking about, but it's also the stuff that everybody's creating that sort of adds to the creative pool.
Yeah. I noticed that you sell all your songs directly off your website. Is that a download store that you built yourself, being a programmer?
Yeah, although I use, to integrate it with PayPal, I use a company called Payloads with a Z. And they basically just have some pages and some shopping carts that deal with the process of the money exchange and delivering the file to them, because I just don't have the chops or the time to write that stuff. But it's pretty easy. You put the song in there and then you grab a link and put it on your site. So yeah, I set that up with the help of that third party.
Is that where you see most of your income coming from? Downloads straight from your website?
Yeah, I mean it varies month to month, but I would say that the digital side is the biggest side for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes right before Christmas. When everybody starts buying CDs, or if I have a month where I'm doing a lot of touring, that I'll make more money from that than from digital sales. But yeah, the digital sales are pretty big for me, and they're a larger percentage for me than they are industry-wide, which I'm sure is just because my audience is a bunch of geeks.
You kind of touched on it a little earlier, that you release your music under Creative Commons. I read that that's something you're pretty passionate about, letting people get the music, whether it's, they get it for free. You just really want to get the music out there. Is that something you would encourage other artists, indie artists, to take part in?
Yeah, I mean, I should point out that Creative Commons licensing doesn't mean that you yourself need to give the music away.
Mm-hmm.
It does mean that people who already have a copy of it can give it to other people. But Creative Commons doesn't necessarily mean free.
Yeah.
Although it can if you want to. And in fact, all the Thing a Week songs were posted for free, and they're still on the iTunes in the iTunes Music Store podcast as free downloads. And I have a mix of freeness and for saleness on my site, and I do think that I think it was Cory Doctorow, the writer, who said, to paraphrase him, something like, obscurity is a much bigger enemy of most artists than piracy is.
Yeah.
And it's really true. For a long time, I spent years writing music and not giving it to anybody, and that didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I do think, I think it's hard to actually measure the way the economy of it works, but I do think if somebody happens to get some of my music for free, and if they like it and pass it along to a bunch of people, and that process continues, if I get a couple of bucks somewhere along that chain of connections, I'm ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly if everybody in the world got the music for free, I wouldn't be making any money. But there are some who choose to pay and some who choose to get it for free, and I think, I don't know, it certainly has worked for me. So yeah, I would definitely encourage, at least to give away a few, and beyond that, to the idea of this Creative Commons license that lets the music, once it's out there, lets the music sort of find its way through all these various networks and connections of people, I think is a really powerful thing.
Uh-huh. Well, I know your Thing a Week experiment, or whatever you want to call it, you have wrapped that up a while ago. Are you any plans for doing another one? Or
I don't know. It was I was pretty shell-shocked by the end.
Yeah.
It was really grueling, and I'm really glad I did it, but I've been a little frightened of deadlines ever since then, and and I've had a long fallow period of not writing a lot of stuff. I have written a couple of things. I don't really know exactly what's next. You know, I've spent the last I guess more than 6 months now, 6 to 8 months, doing more touring and actually learning to play these songs on guitar, which is something I didn't have time to do when I was recording them. You know, the next big project, I don't know what that is, but
do you have plans to do like just a regular studio album where you spend more than a week writing and recording each song, or do you really like doing that kind of on the fly, get it up there, get it out to the fans?
Well, I do really love the immediacy of just recording something and putting it out there, and the idea now of writing 14 songs. The idea of writing 14 songs and just waiting for them to come together before I have an album ready and then releasing that album just seems crazy to me. Like, I don't know how. I can't imagine doing that. I mean, I think that going forward I will probably spend more time on the stuff that I do record. But I do really like this song by song release thing, and it's like the album becomes an afterthought. You know, like you put the songs out there and then, hey, there's 14. Let's put that on a CD.
Through this whole process, did you see your songwriting change, or your approach to songwriting change?
Yes, I would say that I definitely learned some tricks along the way, and I think that when you're working so quickly and so regularly, you know, you right away you discover what are the crutches that you lean on. You know, you're like, oh my God, I always use this chord change.
Yeah.
Or I always use this riff because here it is in the last 3 songs that I wrote.
Yeah.
You know, and then you sort of force yourself to stretch a little bit. So, you know, I think I found some harmonic ideas that I wouldn't have found otherwise if I hadn't really been forced to get out of the rut that I was in. And you know, I do think that there's a marked decline of funny songs over the course of the year, which I don't know how. You know, there are many ways to explain that. You can say that I really grew as an artist, and I felt more confident, and I decided to start expressing my true self. Or you could say that Thing a Week was very hard, and I got really depressed and freaked out over the course of the year. I think there's a little of both.
Yeah. One of my favorite songs of yours was the one you wrote about Pluto. It kind of had a little tinge of humor just because of the timing of, you know, the current events, but at the same time it had a seriousness to it as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of my favorites too. That's of course, it's called I'm Your Moon, and it's a love song sung by Pluto's moon Charon after Pluto was demoted from planet status to dwarf planet status. And you know, it is sort of goofy and you know, it's sort of a silly idea. But for whatever reason, the song came out pretty straight, you know, and I kept the planet references pretty subtle in the song for exactly that reason, because I like the fact that if you don't really listen to the words, it just sounds like a love song, you know.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of people report to me that they sing that song to their children and stuff like that, and you know, it's a really nice thing when you can have something that works on a couple of different levels like that.
The last thing I just want to ask is if you had any advice for any indie artist or DIY artist that's trying to figure out a way to connect with their fan base in a special way, or just kind of channel their niche, kind of like what you did. Do you have any advice that you've maybe even seen other people doing that's working well?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that the more the internet is obviously a giant network, but it's made up of all these tiny networks of various strange niche interests,
Mm-hmm.
and I really think that the more you hook up with those networks, the better. And podcasting is a great way to do it. But stuff like songfight.org, which is this website where it's a weekly songwriting contest, I guess. And every week there's a theme, and you can go there and write songs. And I think getting involved in that kind of stuff is really great because you meet other musicians who are doing the same stuff, and you can exchange ideas. And all I did was I just kept my eyes and ears open, and anytime I saw somebody doing something that I liked, I would steal that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but really, like for instance, Brad Sucks, this guy named Brad Sucks, who's an artist in Canada, is I think a great songwriter and also a really savvy guy when it comes to all this internet stuff. And so I read his blog, and I make sure that and he's like, oh, here's this new social networking site that is doing this really interesting thing with MP3s. I go check it out, and if I like it, I sign up and I put my music up there. And the nice thing about it is most of the stuff is free or cheap. So it's like you can try everything, and the stuff that works, you keep it. The stuff that doesn't work, you haven't really lost anything.
Well, cool. Well, thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with us. I know our artists will very much appreciate from hearing from you. And I don't know if you knew that Derek had sent out an email to
I saw that.
all
I was incredibly flattered, yeah.
Yeah, so we got a lot of feedback from that. People who are like, man, do I have to start blogging every day now? Just no, that's not what that means. But it was good. We got a lot of great feedback. People love just hearing from artists that have something that's found something that's working for them, and just like you said, learning from what they're doing and seeing how you can use that with your music. Well,
as I say, as the story gets told now, it's as if I had a plan, but I really feel like I got lucky and just sort of this is just the way it happened. And I should just say that you guys, CD Baby, like what a great company. Like,
thank you.
The things you do are just so awesome, and for me that was the beginning of like, wow, this really could be possible. To do all this stuff online without a label. So I thank you guys for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. And anytime you want to come back on the podcast and chat, you're more than welcome.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Chances are your pants are not as fancy as the pair of very fancy pants that Mr. Fancy Pants will wear.